Ashley Longmore with Utah State University Extension, just here to tell you a little about the Utah Junior Turkey Show. So the Utah Junior Turkey Show has been around for about 60 years, and it is a 4-H and FFA program where youth order poults from us in April. We pick those poults up from one breeder and one distributor in July, and then from July until November the youth are responsible for raising and growing those turkeys. When November comes around, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, the state show happens. So the state show is where the youth can add one hen and one tom to compete against other kids across the state of Utah for the best hen or the best tom. And so we process those birds, and those birds are put out on a table, and you'll learn a little bit more about that later, but they're judged, and so we kind of place those from 1 to 30, and then those top 30 hens and the top 30 toms, and then the heaviest hen and the heaviest tom get to sell at our state auction. Then after the state show, we process the rest of the extra birds. There are a couple of counties in Utah that do have county shows as well, so some of those kids get to participate in their county shows and their county auctions. But for the most part, the extra birds are processed the week after the state show, so the week before Thanksgiving. We pride our turkeys and our sales with fresh, never frozen birds. The youth usually sell their extra birds, so the birds that aren't entered into a show, to friends and family. There's a huge demand for these birds. We get calls the week before and 2 weeks before the show or Thanksgiving to asking for more kids and more birds because people love these fresh birds. So the thing that's really cool about this livestock show, and we consider it a livestock show, is that all of these birds come from the exact same place. So genetically, these birds are almost identical. So there's no discrepancies as far as breeding or the price that the kids pay for these birds. They all pay the same price. This year I think it was $4 a bird that the youth paid for these birds. And the real factor that comes into when these birds are judged is how they're raised and taken care of and fed. So we have a feeding protocol that we have published that youth can follow, or they can follow their own protocol. And usually your FFA or your 4-H advisor has had some experience and kind of knows what works and what doesn't work. And if you ask for help and ask how to feed it and read some of the guidelines, then it's up to you on how big these birds grow and kind of set you ahead if you do it right. And you can be really competitive with just a little bit of knowledge on feeding turkeys.
Welcome to the Utah Junior Turkey Show plant. This plant is brought in partnership by the USU Extension Service with Utah 4-H, the Utah FFA, and a special partnership with the Utah Department of Ag and Food. The plant is located in Bothwell, Utah, and it's the place where the culmination of the 4-H and FFA turkey projects takes place. What will happen is the folks will show up on the outside of the plant and unload their birds. The birds will be tagged to be able to identify them to each individual owner, and then they're brought in for the harvesting process. Behind me, we have the harvesting floor, and that's our first initial stage. And then the birds are then brought in here on a chain where the main processing starts. Right here is our scalder. It's an industrial size scalder. The water of this scalder is kept generally about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. And when the birds are put into here, they will rotate in and out of the water for roughly about 42 seconds. Once that happens, they're then brought over and put into our industrial plucker, and they're in that plucker for about 50 seconds or so to be able to get all of the feathers off of them. And once they come out of there, they get put back onto one of these chains. As they get onto this chain, then they go through a process where we generally have specialists that sit at different stations that help with that processing. So there's oilers that are removed, there's a gutting process that happens. And as it makes its way, they make their way through this chain, eventually by the time they get done, their legs are tucked and they are weighed, and they are then immediately put into an ice bath. The ice bath has been researched by Utah State University as an important way to quickly cool down the carcasses for better food safety handling. And we've found through research roughly about 2 to 2.5 hours of an ice bath is as quickly as we can cool those birds down to a manageable temperature. And after that time frame, they are then taken, they're put in and bagged, and then once they're bagged, they're put into a freezer where they sit at about 29 degrees Fahrenheit until they're ready to be picked up again by the youth that have raised them. It's a really neat project. It would not be possible without this plant. The uniqueness of this plant and the ability that we have to do what we do for the kids is incredible. And what's amazing is this plant sits here for this sole purpose. So it's opened once a year for a few weeks in November for Thanksgiving processing, and then it's closed down for the remainder of the year. This is all again thanks to the support of Utah 4-H, Utah FFA, and the Department of Ag.
Hi, my name is Lynn Bagley. I'm here at the Utah Turkey Show. Currently, I'm working for Tyson. I manage the research, Tyson Turkey in Storm Lake, Iowa. We're about to judge some turkeys. Hens are always tough to judge because, especially at this age, these are about 15 weeks old, and confirmation on a 15-week-old hen is very good. And that's what we're looking for, is a bird type that has a particular heart-shaped breast with a nice dimple in the between the keel bones, a nice dimpled keel, and then good-looking legs and wings. And the other part of showmanship is to make sure that there's no blemishes on the bird that maybe was caused by management of the bird or management by the participant in the show. So what we have here are our top birds. It's very difficult, they're very similar, but once again, if we go by bird type, we're looking for a heart-shaped dimpled breast. And so you can see these top 4 birds here have very much that case. These 2 birds are very similar, and but I judged this as the top bird over this bird because it has a little more of a, not quite as wide of a kill at the bottom. Not that that's terrible, but this could do some leg problems down the road, and so it's not quite, even though it has more breast meat, it's not quite the type that this bird is. This bird stands tall in its breast and has a good kill on it. This bird is very good as well. That's the reason I judged the difference. This is a very, very good sound bird, but just a little wider here. This bird follows all of that, but it's just a little smaller, but it maybe has even more of a dimpled breast, but it just a little bit smaller on the small size. And this bird I thought was the top bird, but again, the reason I kind of marked it down is it slopes quite a bit in its breast. I don't know if you can see that, but it slopes a little more and it rocks a little more, which is an indication of roachback turkey. And even though that the participant doesn't have much to do with that, but it's there, and it kind of helped me kind of designate between all these birds because they're very similar. This is a very good bird. I like this bird a lot, but ended up moving it down to 4 because of those kind of things. But I really like that bird. I like all 4 of these birds really well. After you get past the first 4 birds, basically they're all very similar, and so you just kind of look for that body type as well, and you just look for other little defects, and size will play a kind of will be a part of that as well. So, anyway, that's kind of what I look for, but you can see as you scan down these birds, they're all very similar, and just a matter of just the judge's discretion, I guess, on what would be good or what would be bad, and how they rank. But I think on these hens at least, that's about as good as you can get.